A man with infinite mana, enough power to wipe out continents, spent 15 years as a useless gate guard. This is Royal, the hero who achieved conceptual annihilation with an ultimate magic spell invented purely to kill mosquitoes. The hero is the one who saved the world, but the idiot who can't figure out why his life is still falling apart. I'm Narumee, and join me as we break down the hilarious and awkward truth of Royal's new life Altera Vita, from social failure to overpowered adventurer, right here, right now. Royal stood inside the massive, crumbling hall, his ragged breaths echoing the dramatic weight of the moment. Even though the fantasy version of the world called him a hero, there was nothing heroic about him right now, just a tall guy trying to keep his composure. Up ahead, Demon Lord Lillian fixed him with faint, predatory interest. She was designed for maximum distraction, all sharp angles, dark magic, and a physique that defied several known laws of physics. She had the audacity to comment on his quaint little skills before asking if he'd like to join her ranks as a servant, promising a special reward. Honestly, if you're a genuine demon lord capable of world-ending calamity, why waste time with recruitment pitches? It screams bad management skills, but hey, in Royal's head, this was peak drama. What truly grated on Royal wasn't the cheesy offer, it was the fact that he instantly caught himself staring at her gravity-defying assets. Dude, focus! The fate of the world is literally pending, and you're doing a visual inspection. Cynthia, his imaginary party's stern moral compass, snapped him back to attention. Her voice was sharp, radiating the kind of judgmental authority only a former high school guidance counselor could muster. Get your act together, Royal. We don't have time for your childish distractions. Yet, as his attention shifted to her, he noticed that while her attire was far more conservative than the Demon Lord's, her chest was also impressively substantial, definitely the size L of discipline. His wandering eyes were a recurring theme even in his own power fantasy. Rinka, the party's embodiment of commitment, instantly called him out. Everything about her screamed discipline and commitment to strength, though Royal couldn't help but notice her modest proportions, the size S of steely resolve in comparison. God, even in my daydreams, I'm being graded on my lack of focus and the comparative bust sizes of my companions. Suddenly, Sarah showed up, fire dancing around her hands. She was the final warning. Stop messing around or I'll make you regret it. Royal just muttered that he understood. He truly did. He understood that his entire imaginary party was just a reflection of his own severe self-doubt, designed to judge and control him. They were less companions and more his internal monologue, weaponized. Wanting to finish what they started, the battle, not the visual assessment, he prepared for one final charge. The others echoed his resolve, but just as Lillian grinned, ready to take them all on, the scene blurred into nothingness. Royal blinked his eyes open. He had been zoning out again. The harsh sunset filtering through the gatehouse signaled the end of his shift. He scoffed, reminded in the most brutal way that he wasn't a hero, just a gatekeeper stuck in a fantasy loop. The disappointment settled in. The dream ended right when it got good, as usual. These mental escapes weren't a hobby, they were the only defense mechanism keeping his sanity intact during years spent rooted to one spot. He'd been doing this job ever since recruitment. 15 years gone in a blink. He still remembered being 15, knights approaching him, impressed by how ridiculously tall he was. They promised him a secure future, praising his build. This is the first and most important lesson Royal learned the hard way. Never bet your future on what others project onto your physical appearance. People saw a giant and assumed immense power or talent. He was a Ferrari body with a lawnmower engine. The praise soured quickly. Despite the great physique, he had zero talent with a sword or spells. Their admiration slowly curdled into quiet judgment. The commander, seeing no hope, suggested he try magic. It was a disaster. Even the simplest spells refused to cooperate. His instructor saw no promise. He was called back, his magical career dead on arrival, and was assigned gate duty at the North Gate, a certified dead zone where nothing ever happened. His orders were soul-crushingly simple. Stand there, don't talk, don't move, and send a message in case the apocalypse started. So he stood, day after day, building epic fantasies in his head. In his mind, he was a powerful spellcaster. In reality, he was a very large, expensive traffic cone. His daydream was interrupted by a literal knight informing him that the commander had summoned him. Inside the office, the punchline of his 15-year career was delivered. "We're letting you go. Your job will be replaced by a new magic surveillance tool." That's the ultimate humiliation, isn't it? The giant sentinel, a man who gave 15 years, replaced by a glorified magical security camera. It's a cruel comedic commentary on the value of physical labor versus cheap, efficient technology. He walked out in stunned silence. The echo of promises, "Your build guarantees a future," swirled like cruel ghosts. They were dumping him like nothing. Regret was a bitter taste. But then, a different feeling surged. Happiness. Pure, unadulterated freedom. The cage was open. He could finally pursue his dream without needing the commander's permission. He decided then and there, he was going to be an adventurer. It was his turn to take center stage in his own, self-written epic. A week drifted by. His adventurous life so far consisted of helping an old lady who threw her back out. That's it. Still, the freedom to walk new roads felt better than slowly rotting at a gate. Hope sparked in his chest when the adventurer town of Melky came into view. That's when he spotted a girl ahead, panting like she'd been running from a tax collector. Thinking this could be his heroic moment, he approached her, ready to ask if she was all right. But when their eyes met, he froze solid. 15 years of social isolation hit him like a concrete wall. Words tripped and died in his throat, leaving him stuttering. The girl, Diz, looked uneasy, unsure what to make of this silent, gargantuan man. Overwhelmed by the situation, his mind went blank, and in the most unheroic move possible, he dropped to the ground. Diz burst into laughter. Mission failed successfully. He failed to be heroic, but he succeeded in distracting her from whatever trouble she was in. Royal had traded his dignity for comic relief. Diz apologized for laughing and helped him up. He realized her ankle was swollen and twisted. This wasn't fantasy. This was a real person who was kind enough to help him despite being hurt. Guilt pricked at his chest for always escaping into fake worlds. He wished he could help her for real. His mind immediately conjured an image of him in mage robes, chanting a complex healing spell. Reality check. He cursed himself for daydreaming again, but then, unexpectedly, her ankle began to glow softly and miraculously realign before their eyes. Diz gasped, thanking him in disbelief. "I've never seen magic like that!" Royal just pointed at himself in confusion. How? The key detail, which he was too shocked to process, was this. The spell he used wasn't even a real spell. It was just a cool-sounding incantation he had made up during his gate-watching sessions. His power came not from studying, but from absolute, repeated belief in his own fictional power structure. He was using a power system based entirely on fanfiction. The girl's ankle was good as new. Diz stared at him in amazement, convinced he was an elite mage. He told her his name, still trying to piece together the physics of his own body. She introduced herself as Diz. She pointed at the scratch slashing across his cheek and told him to fix that too. Royal gave it another shot. The cut vanished. Back when he applied to join the Knights, his mana readings were single digits. Everyone said he was hopeless. What the hell was happening now? Diz, completely unbothered by the sudden emergence of god-tier magic, suggested they travel to Melky together. Royal wondered why she would want to do that. People were usually wary of him. But Diz assured him she wasn't bothered. She saw past the silent giant and recognized a good person, even if that person had the social skills of a bewildered badger. As they walked, Diz opened up, explaining how she had been kicked out as a saint in training because sacred magic never came to her. Furious, she had torn her robes in front of everyone and stormed off, only to trip and bust her ankle. Royal wanted to offer something comforting, but talking wasn't his strength. He managed to blurt out a clumsy line of encouragement, but she was already past it, announcing her intentions to become an adventurer. Despite everything, she walked with her head held high. To Royal, she looked strong as hell. Before either of them could continue, a scream ripped through the trees. Diz instantly asked if he could use detection magic. Royal recalled his fantasy cool assassin, ambush in the woods, powerful spell called Mundus Cura. He lifted his hand and used the spell. It worked perfectly. He picked up movement. 3 high orcs and a lone human locked in combat about 500 meters away. Diz sprinted forward without a pause. Royal stared at his hand. If detection worked, Maybe attack spells weren't out of reach. He recalled his epic against the ancient dragon, where he deployed the ultimate spell, Omnis. As his chant wrapped up, reality snapped back. The magic he only imagined before was now real, locking onto the high orcs, engaging the knights. The knights froze, stunned. One charged desperately. Suddenly, a bright light enveloped the area, literally evaporating the orcs into thin air. Diz and the knights stared wide-eyed at the massive, charred crater left behind. Royal, the accidental nuclear weapon, simply confirmed to Diz they were unharmed. Omnis wasn't a fireball or lightning bolt. It was the ultimate power of a frustrated mind. Conceptual Annihilation. Royal, the former Gatekeeper, possessed the ability to delete enemies from existence, not just wound them. His power level had officially broken the known scale, and he hadn't even meant to cast it. The saved knights rushed forward to thank him. From inside the carriage, a young noble girl named Flora emerged, formally bowing to express gratitude. Royal stood there, awkward and silent. He knew he needed to speak. He tried to apply the same logic as his magic. Imagine confidence, manifest social skills. He opened his mouth, wearing an expression stiff as concrete, and delivered an introduction that was clunky and borderline creepy. His forced manners instantly made Flora's guards tense up, thinking he was a threat. Before a disaster, Diz intervened, dropping to her knee politely. She smoothly explained Royal's awkwardness, assuring them he was just too nervous to speak right. Her words diffused the tension effortlessly. Flora, touched by Diz's grace, invited them to her family estate in Melky. During the carriage ride, Royal was quiet, utterly defeated by his lack of social grace compared to Diz. She and Flora chatted like old friends. Royal watched silently, an idea solidifying in his head. Diz wasn't just good at talking, she was a mythological figure. He mentally crowned her the ancient dragon of communication. This new life was going to require more than just reality-warping ultimate magic. It was going to require the wisdom and grace of a literal ancient dragon to navigate a simple conversation. The contrast was absurd, and the journey had just begun. He was the strongest man alive who needed his diplomatic handler to order a sandwich. They reached Flora's estate, a sprawling mansion that screamed old money and perfect manners. Flora welcomed them warmly. Royal knew he couldn't keep leaning on Diz forever. He needed to figure out how to talk like a normal person, even if he could never achieve Diz's mythical conversational stats. As they stood there, Diz casually asked, "So, are you adventuring solo?" Royal blinked, his brain lagging. "Solo?" She clarified, "No party, just him." He mumbled that this was pretty much his first time. Diz's surprise was genuine. She had assumed, given his gear and the absolute terrifying power of his magic, that he was an experienced, high-ranking operative, maybe an elite knight on a secret mission. Her willingness to overlook his massive physical presence and evident social deficiencies, coupled with his demonstrated power, cemented her status as the ancient dragon. That evening, during dinner with Flora's father, the local lord, the conversation centered around their plans. The lord was incredibly grateful to Royal, treating him almost like family, while Royal just sat there, lost in his head, ruminating on Diz's offer to team up. The doubt whispered loudly, "You're a failure, Royal. You don't deserve a partner." He internally slapped himself, forcing those thoughts into submission. He had to accept. He needed to stand on his own 2 feet, which was physically easy, but mentally impossible without Diz's gravitational pull. The next morning, his nerves jangling like a loose wagon wheel, Royal awkwardly marched to Diz's room. He managed to blurt out a half-baked request to form a party. She instantly agreed, as if he'd just offered her the last slice of pizza. Flora popped up and Diz casually mentioned she'd slept like a log. Royal watched her again, marveling at her natural ease. He once again mentally crowned her the ancient dragon of smooth conversation, feeling amazed and slightly jealous. This wasn't just small talk. It was high-level social engineering, and she did it while probably half asleep. After a sincere farewell from Flora, they headed down the road. It hit him, after years of feeling stagnant, his life was finally moving. Diz looked at him, noticing his thoughtful expression, and asked about the plan. Royal was about to suggest the Somonia kit. Standard rookie routine, register, gear up, dungeon crawl, when Diz interrupted. "No, we need a base first. I'm done with crappy inns." Given her experience and sudden change in status, Royal agreed instantly. He figured she probably had to deal with plenty of idiots bothering her because of her looks and her past role. So, a fortress of solitude was necessary. They decided on a negotiation signal, a subtle cue for maximum intimidation. Their target was the real estate office. Inside, Zambi, the manager, a smug man with 20 years of dubious experience, sipped his tea. He was desperate to offload that cursed, dilapidated mansion nobody would touch. When Diz and Royal walked in, two obvious rookies asking specifically about the haunted place, Zombie instantly pegged them as clueless suckers. He threw out a price of 150,000 yen a month, acting like it was a steal for such a massive property, ghosts included. Diz touched her earlobe. Signal. Royal immediately jumped into action. He stood up, towering over Zambi's desk, throwing death glares so intense, Zombie's confidence began to visibly waver. Diz had instructed him on the simple haggle trick. Realtors always overcharge. Royal's job was to turn up the heat. The bigger the man, the bigger the threat. Royal was the physical manifestation of no lowballers. Diz didn't flinch. She calmly pointed out that exorcisms alone could run 2 million yen. Zombie, sweating slightly, tried to counter with 100,000. Diz touched her ear again. Royal narrowed his eyes, imagining Zambi being subjected to a slow, methodical, ominous deletion. The realtor's composure fractured further. Diz insisted on 50,000. Faced with Royal's silent, terrifying intensity, Zambi finally cracked and accepted the ridiculous offer. This was Royal's first real success using his new power, intimidation as a negotiating tactic. He was too awkward to talk, but he was perfect at silent, existential threat. His lack of communication skills became his greatest asset in the business world. Outside, they celebrated their victory. Headquarters acquired. Royal, looking at Zombie's tear-streaked face through the window, asked if he'd gone overboard. Diz admitted it was intense, but for a cursed mansion, it was a fair deal. Now came the true challenge, the exorcism. And who better to handle high-tier specters than the great mage Sir Royal? Wraiths, as Diz explained, were nasty pieces of work. They were high-tier specters, born when massive piles of leftover feelings like grief, rage, and regret clumped together. They weren't just ghosts, they were emotional sludge given physical form. Animals soaked in this mess twisted into monsters, and the aura alone could make people nauseous. If left unchecked, they became vicious and lethal. They stood facing the crumbling old mansion on the outskirts of town. The place practically screamed free real estate and possible death. Diz shrugged, muttering how she should have asked for even cheaper rent. She pointed out that even a high-ranking priest would struggle with something like this. Royal didn't answer. He was lost in thought again, visualizing Diz morphing into Rael, his ideal of perfection. Elegant, formal, asking him to lend his strength to wipe out the threat. He let himself believe it was real for a brief second. Focus, Royal. Stop looking at the mental image of your companion's perfect posture. Trying to clear his head, he moved forward and started chanting. Light sparked as divine energy gathered in his hand. Declaring himself as the one who purges shadows, he blasted a spell straight at the mansion. An unearthly scream ripped out from inside. Diz flinched, but instantly analyzed what she just witnessed. That trick, abbreviated chanting, is something only the top fraction of mages can pull off. Compressing and firing magic instantly needs insane control and raw power. Seeing Royal do it like it was nothing left her stunned. Who the hell are you, Royal? Royal remained unbothered, stating simply that the wraith was gone, and she should be safe now. Diz, still reeling, managed a small smile, lightly thumped his back and thanked him. The gesture made something warm bloom in his chest. The mansion was purified but needed literal cleaning. They tackled the dining room first. Diz rambled on about quests and future plans while they ate, both covered in grime. It was a small thing, but it was the most fun Royal had had in his entire life. The next morning, Royal woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed. Yesterday was good. Then, a voice came from outside. Someone was calling out, checking if anyone was home. Royal, his stomach twisting with nerves, dragged himself up. He opened the door to find a young girl with a staff. She politely introduced herself, asking if a powerful wraith had lived here recently. Royal confirmed it. She explained that she had sensed a strong magical presence passing by yesterday, and now that someone had moved in, she figured the one who handled it must be inside. She asked if it was him. Royal nodded. She tilted her head. The magic clearly wasn't holy magic, but it was definitely strong. How could a normal exorcism spell pack that kind of punch? Royal immediately freaked out. She was too sharp, too precise. He quickly shut the door, leaning his weight against it. She gave off a weird, unnervingly intense vibe. Outside, she started banging on the door, persistently calling out, saying she just wanted to talk. Royal stayed silent, realizing the bizarre truth. This persistent girl was scarier than any wraith. The next day, Royal recounted the whole encounter to Diz. She nodded casually like it was no big deal. She even expressed interest in meeting the girl. Royal wasn't even surprised. She was the ancient dragon, after all, immune to normal human anxieties. They headed out for shopping. Diz reminded Royal they lacked basic supplies. She didn't even have proper armor, Royal glanced at her dress, noting its complete impracticality for adventuring. They hit the equipment store. Diz picked out a cute, practical outfit. She looks cute, Royal thought, but lacked the courage to say it. Next, a magic bag, a must-have for any adventurer, allowing one to carry huge amounts without weight. At the tool shop, Diz grabbed a bag, handed it to Royal, and efficiently started piling up every supply they needed while Royal stood there, realizing how little he'd helped. Finally, they reached the guild to register Altera Vita, the other life. The place was packed. Royal paused at the entrance, feeling every eye snap onto him. He quickly slapped on his helmet to hide from the public gaze, only to be politely asked by Mocha, the cat-eared receptionist, to take it off. His poor social skills immediately hindered him again. Mocha's eyes widened slightly at the sight of him, but quickly composed herself, walking them through the guild's rules and the adventurer rankings. When she asked for a party name, Diz declared, Altera Vita. Mocha complimented the name, completed the registration, and handed over their tags. Royal stared at his tag, feeling something shift deep inside. He was officially something else now. Across the guild hall, a group of men watched them. One, Miguel, a seasoned adventurer, kept his gaze fixed on Royal. Royal's intense aura was unmistakable to those who could feel power. Miguel's teammates were whispering about backing out of their planned hazing, but Miguel, with a tired sigh, knew they couldn't. He approached Diz and Royal, striking up a friendly conversation, introducing himself and asking them to talk privately. A minute later, they were standing in the middle of a fighting ring. This was the usual rookie hazing. Miguel, calm and unfazed, explained the guild custom. Fresh recruits spar against a senior member. Diz stepped up instantly, volunteering, but Royal moved before her. He stepped into place, readying his spear. He couldn't keep leaning on the dragon forever. He had to stand on his own. He introduced himself, but instantly realized he couldn't use any attack spells, or he'd vaporize Miguel. His thoughts drifted again. He was standing with Alice, a random daydream substitution for Diz, prepared to face the Woman Lord, moving with absolute confidence. As the Demon Lord emerged, he unleashed the strongest defensive magic in existence, Omnirest. The spell, created in his imagination to ward off the real-life terror of mosquitoes that used to sneak inside his gate armor, took effect in reality. The air around the ring suddenly became heavy. Miguel, an experienced adventurer, instantly felt it. The guildmates yelled at him to stop stalling. Miguel ignored them, lunging forward, swinging his weapon with all his might. Royal wondered if the spell had activated. If it hadn't, he was dead. But as the sword made contact, it reflected violently off his armor and sent Miguel hurtling backward. The entire guild fell silent. Royal remained rooted in place, utterly confused. Miguel, the top dog, knocked out by a single, self-inflicted blow. Royal finally realized Omnirest, his absolute impenetrable isolation space designed to repel those annoying, blood-sucking pests, had just sent the guild's best fighter crashing to the ground. Diz, ecstatic, wrapped him up in a hug, cheering him on. Royal was internally thanking those mosquitoes for forcing him to create the spell in the first place. Another adventurer, Munoshi, stepped forward, believing Royal to be a renowned knight. He formally introduced himself and demanded a duel. Royal tried to brush it off, insisting he wasn't worth challenging, but Munoshi only chuckled, mistaking Royal's panic for humility. Munoshi surged forward, stopping moments before striking. Royal hadn't even seen him move. Royal threw away his spear, realizing it was useless, But this was again mistaken for unwavering confidence. Munoshi vowed to finish it in one strike. Royal tried to explain, but it was too late. Suddenly, Diz blitzed in. She planted her explosive rhythm blast punch right into Munoshi's face. The impact sent him flying across the hall, crashing straight through the guild wall. Royal stood frozen, his brain lagging. He knew Diz was confident, but seeing this side of her left him speechless. She casually glanced at him, stating Munoshi wouldn't listen to reason, so she handled it. He quickly shook his head, praying he hadn't pissed off the ancient dragon of communication by his stunned silence. This new life was definitely going to be interesting. Later that night, the guild hall hosted a chaotic feast, primarily fueled by booze and the bewildered respect earned by Royal. Miguel eventually explained the purpose of the newbie hazing ritual to knock down the hollow confidence of fresh recruits before they got themselves killed by doing something stupid. He admitted, with a tired groan, that in Royal's case it clearly wasn't necessary, mostly because Royal had almost killed him. Royal quietly looked around. Despite the initial violence, these people were surprisingly kind. Maybe this life wouldn't be so bad after all. Then, the girl from yesterday appeared. Sandy. She slipped into the gathering, apologizing for barging into his newly exorcised mansion. Royal's mind drew a blank until she put on her hat, and the memory of the persistent, intense girl who wanted to be his disciple came flooding back. He waved her off, saying it was fine, realizing she wasn't as terrifying as he remembered. Sandy leaned in, her eyes intense, and asked him straight out to take her on as a student. Diz, meanwhile, was passed out cold nearby after downing too much wine, leaving Royal without his ancient dragon of communication handler. Sandy was dead serious. She'd sensed the absolute power when Royal had blocked Miguel's attack, knowing it wasn't just armor. It was magic. She also brought up the mansion exorcism. Pulling that off shouldn't have been so easy. She pressed him again to teach her. But this wasn't something he could teach. It was just his own internalized, highly specific mental trauma turned into power. He decided to politely turn her down, using a line he thought sounded humble and encouraging. He told her she wasn't ready yet. His words backfired instantly. Her face crumpled, tears welled in her eyes, and before he could explain, she bolted away, sobbing, swearing she'd become better and prove she was worthy. As she vanished, she spun around mid-run, shouting that she would never quit until she earned the right to be his student. Royal sighed. What he meant was that he wasn't ready to take on a disciple yet, not the other way around. But yeah, judging by the hysterics, she probably missed that subtle nuance completely. Another social catastrophe averted by immediate flight. Elsewhere, inside the Guildmaster's office, the Guildmaster asked Mocha about the new recruits. Mocha's first comment was, predictably, a compliment about Royal's face, calling him good-looking. The Guildmaster immediately clarified he was asking about their capabilities, not their appearance. Mocha went on about how the hot night had wiped the floor with Miguel without even breaking a sweat. The Guildmaster silently clocked how smitten she was. Switching focus, he asked about the other newcomer. Mocha mentioned Diz's outfit resembled a martial artist's and speculated she might be tied to the church. That piqued his curiosity. If she was connected to the Saccharine Knights, a major church affiliate, she was worth watching. For now, they'd watch quietly. Mocha promised to report if anything came up. The Guildmaster just hoped nothing troublesome landed in their laps, a vain hope considering Royal was now registered in his city. Royal later recounted the entire embarrassing episode with Sandy to Diz. Diz, now awake, slapped a hand over her face. Royal blinked, confused. He figured Sandy was just a clueless newbie with weird misconceptions, probably a lower-tier mage. Diz then dropped the bomb. Royal, she isn't some random amateur. That's Sandy, probably the best mage in town. Royal was stunned. Diz elaborated. Sandy's name was constantly in the Adventurer's newspaper. Her magical prowess was top tier. She was apprenticed to the head court magician and had the skills to take that job herself. Since Royal had spent 15 years in a glorified broom closet, it made sense he hadn't heard of her. Diz didn't sugarcoat it. Someone of Sandy's caliber had lowered herself to beg him for guidance. And what did he do? Royal's stomach churned as he recalled telling the prodigy she wasn't skilled enough. Panic flared. He had basically insulted the city's magical genius. Diz let out a warm laugh, calling him hilarious, the most socially inept powerhouse she'd ever met. She reassured him that Sandy seemed like a good person and suggested they properly talk it out next time. Realizing he was out of social practice for 15 years, Diz kindly offered to help him with communication training. Royal thanked her sincerely. The ancient dragon of communication was officially offering personal tutoring. Morning rolled around and it was time for the first dungeon dive. As they made their way, Diz tried to soothe Royal's worries, advising him to enjoy it rather than be nervous. When they reached the guild hall, the place was buzzing. Adventurers crowded the quest board. Mornings were a madhouse due to the first-come, first-serve policy. Suddenly, the doors slammed open. A man burst inside, gasping for air. "Stampede! A horde of high orcs has appeared in the forest." The news caused an immediate shockwave. Royal remembered his gate-watching post was meant for stampede prep, but nothing ever happened for 15 years. Now, on his first day attempting a dungeon, the universe decided to catch up on missed events. Stampedes usually happened once every few decades. High orcs weren't small fry. Even a B-rank adventurer struggled against one. 60 of them could wreck the city. The guildmaster strode in, calling an emergency request. 60 high orcs in the Est Forest. He offered encouragement. Compared to dragons and wraiths, high orcs are small fry. If we fight together, we can win. The guild roared in agreement, gearing up immediately. The forest was half a day's trek away. Everyone, including the guildmaster, headed out, leaving Diz and Royal behind since they were fresh F-rank newbies. Royal, however, felt a strange detachment. He'd already vaporized 3 high orcs. This quest felt underwhelming. He still wanted to hit the dungeon. Diz gave a shaky smile. "We can't go dungeon crawling with this going on. Let's head to the forest, too. Helping out might wrap things up faster." They clasped hands and prepared to leave, but Royal paused. Something was nagging at him. They were told about 60 orcs, but he wanted more info. Diz stepped back as Royal placed his palm on the dirt, casting Mundus Cura, the detection spell. A massive beam of light shot down onto the entire city, extending beyond the forest. Diz blinked in shock. Royal confirmed it was the same spell he used during Flora's incident, working perfectly this time. His gaze darkened. He spotted a cluster of 62 high orcs heading straight for the city. The count matched the guild's report. But trailing behind them was another mass, 205 high orcs. The first wave was a decoy. The guild expected 60, which was their max capacity. If they went all out on that group only to meet a second force triple the size, they would face total annihilation. Royal told Diz to stay back. He couldn't let these people be wiped out. Lifting his hand, he channeled a swirling mass of mana. He triggered the Omni spell. Dozens of magic spears exploded outwards, streaking toward the Est Forest. The air ripped apart with their speed as they blazed toward the advancing high orcs. Diz watched in stunned silence, and with that it was over. Deep in the Est Forest, where the guild expected a brutal clash, silence reigned. They found no high orcs, just a huge crater. The guildmaster and everyone else stood frozen. They'd braced for a bloody fight, but it was over before they even raised their weapons. Diz was stunned, but quickly singing Royal's praises. She asked if they should file a report. Royal shot down that idea. "No one would believe us anyway," he mumbled. "Besides, the guild's busy." The moment the danger passed, Sandy appeared again, literally shaking with excitement at Royal's amazing magic. She once again begged to be his disciple, her soul practically pouring out of her eyes. Both Royal and Diz blinked. Diz instantly recognized her as Sandy, the magical prodigy. Diz introduced herself as Royal's party mate and nudged Royal to talk to Sandy properly this time. Royal tried to keep it chill, but Sandy dropped a bomb on him. She confessed she fell in love at first sight. Royal went into complete panic mode, but his intuition, honed by years of fantasy novels, told him this wasn't what it sounded like. His intuition proved correct as Sandy quickly clarified that she was in love with his magic. In fact, she even recognized the spell he used to stop the stampede, calling it ultimate magic. The words caught Royal so off guard his mind went blank. He drifted back into his fantasy world where he was facing down a monster, and his party members covered for him while he charged his ultimate magic, obliterating the monster and winning their affection. Snapping back to reality, he saw Sandy watching him like a lost kid. Collecting himself, he apologized again, insisting he couldn't take her as a disciple. But Sandy tried to convince him, revealing she was the top apprentice of the head court magician. Royal's brain short-circuited. Why would someone like her bother with him? He repeated that he couldn't teach her anything. She misinterpreted it, thinking it was some kind of highly guarded original technique, which drew her interest even more. She bowed deeply, practically begging him. At a loss, he turned to Diz for help. Diz stepped in with her usual cheerful attitude. Sounds like a blast. Royal realized Sandy looked like a good kid, and having an actual high-tier mage might not be a bad idea. Sandy lit up and thanked him profusely. Diz laughed softly, saying they'd officially recruited a hardcore Sandy fan to the team, then suggested heading back to base. Once they were back, Diz suggested checking Royal's mana level. She tested herself first. 12. A beginner mage usually hits 50 to 100. Sandy went next, revealing her reading just over 800. Someone past 1,000 could go down in history. Royal, who once had a single-digit reading, stepped up. He figured with the power he'd been using, he must have jumped up significantly. The second he placed the device in his mouth, it flared to life, showing a reading of 9,999. The shock on everyone's face was total. Diz stared, explaining the device only displayed 4 digits, meaning his mana could be far, far beyond what was shown. Sandy, however, looked ecstatic, expecting nothing less from her master. Diz quickly cut in, her voice serious. Royal, this level of power needs to stay a secret, no matter what. He nodded, a cold pit forming in his stomach. With mana like that, people would either want to dissect him or treat him like a living nuke. Diz warned him that his magic wasn't just strong. It was so far off the charts that normal people couldn't comprehend it. What felt casual to him looked freakish to everyone else. That's why he needed to watch his words. If he acted like his abilities were no big deal, people would get the wrong idea and chaos would follow. Royal quietly accepted it. All those cool lines he used to imagine spouting after saving the day were officially off the table. He was too powerful to brag. What a tragedy. Evening wrapped around the guild hall. Diz and Sandy finished setting up Sandy's party registration, making Altera Vita officially a trio. F-rank quests were finally available. Royal glanced over the board and pointed out a job: clearing out ghosts. It looked easy, but the payout was huge. 20,000 gold instead of the usual 2,000 or 3,000. That kind of cash screamed hidden trouble. Sandy shrugged off his doubt. If the master is cool with it, we'll handle whatever pops up. Diz left the decision to him. Royal took point. Diz elbowed Royal to talk to the receptionist. He dragged himself over to Mocha at the front desk, stiff as a robot as usual. Mocha calmly asked for the request sheet and his adventurer tag. Royal realized his tag was still dangling around his neck, and he had no clue how to unclasp it. Mocha offered a hand and told him to lean down. Her unexpected kindness caught him off guard, but he obeyed. However, instead of just unhooking it, she wrapped her arms around him, teasing that it was stuck before finally slipping it free. She took the papers, said she'd handle the processing, and reminded him he could always ask her for help again. When he returned, Diz asked how it went. Royal told her the request was accepted, but he was still reeling from Mocha's weird behavior. He brought up his suspicion that she might be plotting something, maybe dumping extra work on them or manipulating them somehow. Talk about being dense on a whole other level. Diz laughed, assuring him he was probably reading too much into it. Sandy pointed out that Mocha usually didn't even look twice at other male adventurers. Diz added that Mocha genuinely liked him. You're strong and honest, which makes you stand out, she explained. Not to mention you're easy on the eyes. Royal went stiff, stunned, speechless by the compliment. The other two were surprised he had no clue. Diz also pointed out that this was probably why his old colleagues envied him. Royal had a flash of realization, wondering what he had been doing all his life. Diz, however, quickly clarified that she wasn't with him for his looks. Guys who only rely on their faces pissed her off. Now that he had stopped wearing his helmet, though, he probably wouldn't be left alone anymore. He drew in a deep breath and reminded himself the past was done. He was finally the adventurer he always wanted to be, and it was time to live this new life. With that said, they headed off to start their first official jobs. They arrived at the site of their first official F-rank quest, which was, naturally, a graveyard. Royal wondered why a simple ghost hunt paid so much. Diz explained that the reward included the cost of holy water, which was required to defeat low-level ghosts before they clumped together into something nastier. A bottle of holy water cost about 1,000 gold, and if 10 ghosts showed up each night, supply costs stacked quickly. Even after expenses, rookie adventurers still pocketed a solid profit, but most avoided the gigs because, well, graveyards are creepy. Diz assured Royal they'd make a killing, literally, since his magic was better than any holy water. Diz headed up to the client's window to check in. The guy, sipping a drink, looked surprised to see her, warning her not to half-ass the job. She nodded, grabbed the keys, and they headed to the graveyard. As they stepped inside, both Diz and Sandy instantly felt something off. Royal wondered if a powerful spirit might be lurking nearby, preparing to unleash another daydream-level threat. He started chanting his spell, but Sandy beat him to the punch, instantly using her detection magic. Royal watched, amazed at seeing actual professional magic being used for a change. Diz assured him everything was fine. She reminded them about the wraith exorcism they pulled off at their base. The lingering overflow of Royal's pure, concept-annihilating power had drifted over to the nearby graveyard and wiped the place clean too. The ground and air were completely purified. Ghosts wouldn't be spawning here for a good while. Royal realized they hadn't just completed their job. They had essentially erased a job category for other future rookie adventurers for an entire year. He mumbled an apology, worried he'd messed up again. Diz told him to chill out. "You didn't do anything wrong," she winked. "Depending on how we word our report, we can spin this however we like." Diz headed back to the client's place to file the report. She told him the job was finished. The man looked skeptical, instantly accusing them of chickening out. Diz shot back firmly that there was nothing left. No ghosts would be showing up for at least a year. Still skeptical, his tone turned sharp as he ordered her to get back to work. Diz's patience snapped. She held up a simple cross, telling him to understand what he was seeing. The client paused. His face shifted. He asked if she could be an inquisitor. Royal, watching nearby, instantly knew the weight of that title. Agent sent by the Holy Church to root out illegal acts. He'd seen a few pass through back in his gatekeeping days and knew impersonating one could get you executed. Diz kept her tone steady, letting the client assume the worst, but clarified she wasn't there to lecture or report anyone. She just wanted one thing. With Royal and Sandy in tow, she guided the client to the graveyard, showing him the purified state. Convinced, he was ready to hear her. Request. It was simple. She asked him to keep putting up the beginner ghost quests like before, ensuring broke newbie adventurers still had a chance to make easy money. When he paused, Diz casually flashed her investor key. Not as a threat, but to clarify her true authority lay not with the church's enforcement, but with the guild's financial backing. That rattled him enough, and he caved instantly. He signed off on the quest form. Their job was complete. Later, the three sat at a small restaurant. Diz sighed, relieved the quest mess was over. Royal eyed her with quiet suspicion, bringing up the Inquisitor rumor. Diz explained that she never claimed to be one. The client just jumped to that conclusion on his own because of her demeanor and the cross. Royal pointed out that if word got out, she might be in trouble, but she shrugged it off, saying the church treated her like family, and the worst she'd get was a light scolding. Their food arrived, looking incredible. They raised their glasses, celebrating Sandy officially joining the crew and finishing her first quest. While they ate, Royal let himself relax. Diz asked him how the adventurer life had been treating him. His mind drifted over the past few days, the rare stampede, Sandy becoming his apprentice, their ghost hunt, and discovering his mana and spell powers. Putting it all together, it had been pretty damn fun so far. Diz beamed, happy to hear it. Sandy chimed in, declaring this the best day since she was accepted as his apprentice. The next morning, Royal woke up after pulling an all-nighter reading books about conversation skills. He knew he needed to get better at talking. He was applying himself to social training with the same seriousness he would apply to fighting a demon lord. As he walked out, he ran into Sandy, recalling the first principle. Accept what is said, he replied naturally. Sandy, looking anxious, admitted she'd been worried about barging in. Royal remembered the next tip. Agree and affirm. He told her it was perfectly fine and that he was looking forward to seeing her. Relief softened her face. Wanting to keep the flow going, he asked if she truly thought he was fit to be her teacher. Sandy reassured him without hesitation, explaining that analyzing magic was her strong suit, and just witnessing his spells gave her plenty to study. Royal remembered the book's advice about showing surprise, so he acted appropriately impressed. Sandy lit up, declaring she'd master his magic someday. Following the model, Royal praised her, telling her she was driven as hell. That's when it hit him. He just nailed the entire conversational model from memory without trying. Sandy noted how much easier it felt to talk to him today. Royal found himself amazed at how effective these conversation tricks were. Just the day before, he learned people thought he was good-looking. If he keeps sharpening his social skills, maybe he really will end up popular someday, the ancient dragon of communications methods were already yielding results. Afterward, they joined Diz for breakfast. Today was a special day, their first dungeon raid. They made their way to the town's west gate. At the entrance, they met a young female guard, Eliza. She looked him over and asked if he was one of the Sakura Knights. He told her he used to work as a gatekeeper. Her face lit up with excitement, instantly thinking she was meeting one of the elites. Suddenly, all his conversation training flew out the window as he fumbled to explain his pathetic North Gate post where barely anyone ever passed. Still, the girl was starstruck, asking to shake his hand. When he shared his name, she gasped and declared she'd never wash her hand again. People actually say that, Royal thought, stunned. She assumed he was in town on some secret mission and promised to keep quiet. Royal stood there, saying nothing, letting her run wild with assumptions. He realized he hadn't managed to say anything meaningful. Earlier conversations went well because the person was friendly and agreed with him, but this time he completely lost his grip on the exchange. Diz teased him, calling him an elite gatekeeper. Jokes aside, they needed to focus. They were finally heading into the dungeon. Royal nodded firmly. Their first dungeon lay ahead. All three were ready. With their resolve aligned, the overpowered, socially crippled mage, the ancient dragon of communication, and the magical prodigy fangirl, they stepped forward towards the dungeon of beginnings, prepared for whatever waited inside. His new life, Altera Vita, had truly begun. So that was Royal's epic journey through social ineptitude and accidental omnipotence. His story is a brilliant reminder that your greatest strength can hide in your deepest flaw. If you enjoyed analyzing why his mosquito repellent spell vaporized 100 orcs, smash that like button. And hey, while our analysis covered the highlights, trust me, this world has even more hilarious detail and character development we couldn't fit into one video. Do yourself a favor and find the original manga, it's worth the read. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next deep dive.